समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
This is really very sad and very disappointing and very embarrassing. This is about the massacre of the Sikhs in Delhi. Now, this is not an exhaustive account of what happened because this is an eyewitness account. I wasn't there everywhere. Books have been written about this. Films have been made about this. And contrary to what some people say, documentaries have also been made about this. So I'm not giving you a full comprehensive picture, but I'm telling you what I saw as a reporter in Delhi on the back of my motorbike, right? Enfield 200. In fact, I covered those riots like that. That was 1984. I didn't own a car yet. 1984, October 31, November 1, and then onward. So that's the account I'm going to give you. It's a story that I might describe with some justification as probably the saddest event in independent India's history, because it's not as if massacres haven't taken place elsewhere. Our country is no stranger to tragedies, avoidable tragedies. The reason I picked this one out as the worst of those massacres and tragedies in India's history after the partition riots is that it happened in Delhi, in the capital. All of what happened, all of what I saw happened in like a mile, maybe 1.5, 2 kilometer radius from the Rashtrapati Bhavan, which represents the glory of the Republic. So if the Indian state, mighty Indian state, our country's state, failed to protect its citizen so close to where it resides, it has to be the greatest tragedy in independent India's history. How did we cover it? And what is it that we saw? The fact is, the assassination of Indira Gandhi caught me on the wrongest foot possible in transit from New York to Delhi. I was returning from a 6-week fellowship of the American Society of Newspaper Editors, ASNE, in the New York Times newsroom at New York, and with its Washington bureau. This was 1984. I had suitcases laden with the usual gifts and goodies that you brought along from your first visit overseas those days: clothes, minor gadgets, shoes, books, and toys for my 3-year-old. I had just that one child yet. Desperately homesick, I climbed down from the Air India Jumbo to see ground staff go through their motions as if in mourning. Indira Gandhi, one of them, a Sikh. This ground staff officer was a Sikh Air India officer. One of them, a Sikh, said Indira Gandhi had been assassinated by her bodyguards and riots had broken out in the city. That, he said, explained the dark columns of smoke you could see in the distance, even from the airport. Still, one couldn't be prepared for what unfolded on the ride home. Then, in New Delhi's southernmost middle-class ghetto, Saket. That's where I used to live. There were mobs on the way, actually not mobs, just small gangs with iron rods, swords. They were like wolf packs on the prowl, attacking shops, homes, and burning whatever they could, whatever they found. Another few hours and all of Delhi was like a battlefield, with burning fires, screaming people in conquest or in agony. So attackers in conquest and the victims in agony. Or correction, it wasn't a battlefield. I correct myself. It wasn't a battlefield. It was, or at least in several places, like a city that had just been conquered by some awful hordes in medieval times. Within 12 hours of Indira Gandhi's death, the story of her assassination by her 2 bodyguards had been overtaken by the reprisals against the Sikhs in Delhi. If one could see this on a 40-minute drive from the airport to home in 1984 so clearly, what excuse could the government or the police ever have of having been taken by surprise by the rioting or the intensity of its spread? Since this is one of the better covered and researched communal killings in the country, I am avoiding saying riots. Communal killings in the country, in India's independent history. The finest coverage, in fact, was in the Indian Express and its sister Hindi Delhi Jansatta. I wasn't there then, so I'm not trying to take credit for this myself. It was long before I rejoined the Express. At this point, I was with India Today. Let me not waste your time, therefore, trying to recapitulate all that happened. In any case, so much was happening simultaneously in so many parts of the city and elsewhere in the country, Kanpur notably, that any reporter, even one riding in Nifty and Field 200, could cover only that much of it. But there are scenes and stories you cannot forget, and the future generations must not be allowed to forget, because it is precisely due to our culture of evasion when it comes to our own collective crimes that as a nation and a society, we are not able to apply closure to our most tragic turning points in history. You want to know if the Congress, at least at the local levels, was involved? I will repeat some stories I documented then. The answer, of course, is yes, the Congress was involved at many levels. I will repeat some stories I documented then. I witnessed a scene created by a local Congress leader, Dharamdas Shastri. In 1993, by the way, the Jain Agrawal Inquiry Committee recommended registering a case against him. And in 2005, the Nanavati Commission found credible evidence against him, following which Union Home Ministry ordered the CBI to reopen the case. But nothing happened and Shastri is now dead. He was there at Karol Bagh police station as he protested. I found him at the Karol Bagh police station as he protested against the arrest of congressmen caught with property looted from Sikh shops and homes. Recovered the property for sure, he said, but why arrest? They are not criminals, he said. Can you believe it? Brahm Yadav, the Delhi Youth Congress president then, was far ahead of this too. He protested against a joint army-police raid in Kodapur, his block. And you want to know the reason why? He said a fair raid could not be carried out by a patrol led by a Sikh army officer assisted by another Sikh from the police. One most significant fact about the rioting was how dramatically it all stopped the moment the first army units moved in, including Soviet-made BMP infantry fighting vehicles. You can still see the BMPs in visuals of the fighting that's going on in Ukraine right now. In Delhi at that point, nobody had seen those infantry fighting vehicles or armored vehicles on the streets of Delhi, armored fighting vehicles, except in the Republic Day parade. Now they were in eastern Delhi, they were in Trans-Jamna colonies, sort of the semi-slums that Delhi has. You can imagine what they were like in 1984. They were in a much worse state. The army had to hardly fire any shots. In fact, I did not hear the army fire any shot. The army had to hardly fire any shots, make any arrests. As the news of the army's arrival spread, the mobs decided to simply melt away. They knew they were not dealing with Delhi police anymore. They knew it was the army and the army meant business. Delhi police was incompetent where it wasn't complicit and mostly absent, some for predictable reasons like leave, some because of panic, and much because of indecision by the higher brass that somehow decided to tell the Sikhs in the force to stay out of trouble. They didn't want the Sikhs in Delhi police to come out. Now, contrast that with the army, which had army officers leading their patrols. And you want to know more about Delhi police? I will tell you. Here is one of the scenes I witnessed and reported. A mid-level police officer with a strong armed patrol sat on a chair picked up from a nearby house and watched coolly as a mob chased a group of Sikhs, including women with sticks, iron rods and swords, while two of the panicked Sikhs fought desperately to keep them at bay with iron rods. Why don't you people do something? I asked the officer. How can I? He said with mock helplessness. I have a very small force. I am waiting for reinforcements. There were tragedies to see and record across the city, but none more heartrending than the killings in the outlying, particularly East Delhi colonies, where lumpins looted, raped and killed, not merely unhindered, but often helped along by the police. I reached Block 32 in Trilokpuri, the Trans-Yamuna, near slum, on the second afternoon of the riots. Its narrow lanes were piled with half-burnt bodies, in the odd case a decapitated one. I spoke with Jasmeer Kaur, a survivor from a poorer section, a real slum, and she said they would strike him unconscious, douse him with kerosene and touch him with a burning torch. It was also the first time, and hopefully the last in India's history, that rioters used the necklacing method of killing, putting an old automobile tire around the victim's neck and setting it on fire. One thing I can tell you from that unfortunate experience is that the most horrible and the longest lasting stench of all is the stench of burning flesh. It doesn't leave your head even after 4 decades have passed since. One thing I have never been able to understand fully is the exact motivation of the rioters. Was it communal? Maybe for some. But you did not see so many religious symbols on the attackers, no Hindu slogans, and most specifically, nobody reported a case of neighbors attacking neighbors. At least I didn't see any. So I can't say nothing ever happened. I'm only describing to you what I saw. And nobody had told me, to be sure, not to see anything or not to report anything I might have seen. A lot of what I'm telling you, a lot of the detail featured in the India Today story on the riots that was published in that fortnight. Delhi, in fact, had more stories than of Hindu neighbors protecting the odd Sikh in their locality, even at the risk of their lives. What was the motive then? Was it rioting or rape or looting? By the time the rioting had been on for 24 hours, nobody could really say which was the main act and which was the sideshow. The very first trigger, admittedly, came from anger against the assassination. It started outside All India Institute of Medical Sciences, where doctors were trying to revive Mrs. Gandhi. Hopeless job. By that time, she was gone. The first to experience this was then President Gyani Zail Singh himself. His motorcade was attacked. His escort officer removed his turban in panic to avoid being identified and attacked. Tirlochan Singh, his widely popular press officer, pulled out his seat cushion from his car to protect himself from the mob's lathis or lathi blows. But once it spread and it became evident that the police had no intention. The police had no intention at all of intervening. The looters and arsonists became bold. They came out in small bands. They did not even have to be in large mobs or anything. The only safety in numbers you needed was maybe 30, 40, 50 people, not thousands, not hundreds. This is when the most exclusive localities were targeted. Along the radial roads emanating from Connaught Circus, fires blazed as if in a properly choreographed show. Furniture shops on Pachkuya Road were set on fire. That's a furniture market in Delhi. Paharganj, Sheela Cinema, the abandoned Bangla Sahib Gurdwara, though very ably defended by young Sikhs carrying iron rods, lathis and the odd shotgun. A glass and mirror shop where a Sikh lay dead, impaled by shards of large glass sheets that rained on him as the shop was looted. In the more central and generally less congested parts of Delhi, looting was the primary motive. In East Delhi, poorer areas may have been killing, but in the richer areas, looting was of primary motive. South Extension markets, Perfection Silk and Sari House and Wings shoe shops, well-known showrooms were looted and burnt. The houses of 2 Punjab and Sindh Bank chairmen, Mohinder Singh and Bhai Inderjit Singh in Friends Colony East were looted and burned. In nearby Maharani Bagh, mobs arrived with lists carrying numbers of rich Sikhs' homes. Again, the purpose was only loot and arson. This then spread to Haus Khas, Vasant Vihar and Safdarjung Enclave. In distant, sleepy Saket, where we lived, mobs came in a neat row of 3-wheelers, as if in a procession, and burnt down the very pretty new Gurdwara, leaving the Granthi for dead. He wasn't. He was later rescued by neighbors, all of them Hindu. On a drive back from my office to home one afternoon, 2 of my women colleagues and neighbors, Anita Kaul Basu and Anuradha Kapoor, squeezed themselves on the pillion as no other transport was available. We drove past the Chirag Delhi area and saw a beautiful new bungalow fully ablaze on the intersection of the Outer Ring Road and what is now Josie Bros Tito Mark. Anita, my colleague, who with her equally talented husband Siddharth Basu, the famous quiz master of our times, and with whom she set up a great production house that's been producing Kaun Banega Crorepati, was then expecting her first child, as we were expecting our second. Both boys are now grown up and working for many years. In fact, it was just last month that we attended the wedding of Anita and Siddharth Basu's son. You now see how far back it was, 40 years back, and yet we still cannot erase that image from our eyes or our minds. In fact, The least celebrated story of those riots is also the most inspirational and reassuring. It is the Hindu neighbors setting up vigils, even in upper middle class localities, and carrying out 24-hour patrols to protect the Sikhs. Mostly, these were no more than motley groups of babus and other salaried professionals, including this reporter, I, in G Block Saket, wielding anything we could find: lathis, walking sticks, iron rods, hockey sticks, cricket bats. Hockey sticks actually were the most effective weapon of defense. But all of this was in short supply. We put on crash helmets, we put on whatever thick jackets we had, although it wasn't quite winter yet, for protection. But patrolling was to protect your Sikh neighbors. I noted then that sometimes these patrols looked like excited teams of uncles and teenagers in some mohalla cricket match. These defenders would not have lasted if challenged by even half a mob with any persistence. But the fact that these were never challenged, these patrols were never challenged. The mobs saw you, or mobs such as the mobs were small bands of motley bands of thugs. They saw you and they went away. They went away and then disappeared. They never came back to colonies which had these vigilantes patrolling to protect themselves. This tells you the real story of the 1984 killings. It wasn't a communal riot in the classical sense. There was no mass upsurge, no widespread frenzy. It was just 3 days out for the looters, rapists, killers and lumpen, given a furlough by the police and the local government, and of course by the Congress party then. 1/5 of the 30,000 strong Delhi police then was Sikh, but it was not to be seen. Of its SHOs, station house officers, or those heading police stations, 13 out of 66 and 4 out of its assistant commissioners of police were Sikh. Many of them were told to stay at home or stay in the headquarters. They bitterly complained to us reporters that they were being treated like outcasts, not wanted by the brass, though they were willing to work even as they worried about their own families. But they were kept out, quarantined. The most striking stories of police incompetence and casual complicity was brought out by Rahul Bedi and Joseph Maliakan of the Indian Express. In an inquiry later, they accused then additional commissioners Nikhil Kumar, SC Jatav and DCP Sevadas of negligence. Nikhil Kumar, who later became an MP and governor, was reported to have pleaded that he was on leave and merely visiting the headquarters, so was no more than a guest artist. Nikhil denied this later, but the larger belief still remains that Delhi police failed the uniform. And until today, nobody senior enough has been called to account. And then you say, why there is no closure on India's tragedies ever? That I do not follow the correct chronology and put the riots ahead of the assassination. Indira Gandhi's assassination is a deliberate editorial call and not merely an admission of the fact that I was late on the assassination story. Everybody was, because as I had said earlier, riots had overtaken everything else, even the assassination. In fact, even as the funeral procession made its way past New Delhi to the banks of the Jamna, rioting still raged. But as after Operation Blue Star, Rowley Books again brought out a book, Assassination and After, in which again I have a contributory chapter titled Clause of Conspiracy. While Rahul Bedi wrote on the riots, Arun Shourie on militants, and Pranoy Roy, who made his mark as a psephologist globally by calling the 1984 elections that followed the assassination and the killings, right, bullseye, wrote about them. So all of us contributed chapters to that book. If you can find it, it's titled Assassination and After, published by Rowley. The conspiracy was later fully unraveled, accused put to trial and convicted, so there isn't much left to tell you now. But I cannot forget the visit to Agwan Khurd, near the border enclave of Dera Baba Nanak in district Gurdaspur, where Satwant Singh, the younger of the two assassins, hailed from. I remember his mother Pyaro protesting her son could never do such a thing. That he was such a Congress loyalist that even as a child he only played with Congress flags, etc. She even pleaded that they were not a family of traditional Sikhs, that they believed in the Babaji of Radha Swami Satsang at Byas, not far away from their village, not so far away, and further that Satwant Singh had visited the ashram thrice, Babaji's ashram thrice, to be baptized as a Radha Swami instead. I could see a mother's desperation, and no mother would ever believe anything else but that her child was never capable of committing murder, and least of all of the woman he protected. But that year of madness had made too many simple, sane people do crazy, unexpected things. This election campaign that followed the assassination was marked by a one-sided intensity, not much different from Narendra Modi's in 2014. But I dare say, while it had the optimism of Rajiv Gandhi's youth and his promise of the 21st century and his sympathy for his mother's assassination, it had stronger negative and even communal overtones than any seen until 2014. One slogan was, Rajiv Gandhi ka ऐलान नहीं बनेगा खालिस्तान. The advertisement campaign, designed by Rediffusion, the agency then invoked iron rods and daggers, etc., and barbed wire fence as far from subtle metaphors for insecurity and paranoia. Nevertheless, Rajiv Gandhi won a majority of 415, and my one abiding recollection is his smiling, gentle but devastating declaration of having reduced the opposition to a 10 plus 2 plus 3 system. 10 plus 2 plus 3, 10 for Janata, 2 for Jansangh, which later became BJP, and 3 for Socialist. This is how the tenure system of school-college education was then described. Of course, it took 30 years after that for the BJP, now led by Narendra Modi, to completely turn that wheel of fortune.